Okay, it says I'm live. So, in order to know if that's true or not, I need you to let me know. So, if I can see some 5x5s coming through or the usual 5x5, 6, or anything else that you guys want to throw out there, it will help me get things started. But I do want to welcome you to another Monday night where we're going to discuss some of the things happening right now regarding concerns about ISIS. Obviously, the terror group and attacks here on U.S. soil that our officials seem to be very concerned about. So, let's see here. What's up? Love the earlier live stream time. Greetings from the Palmetto State, says Off-Road Armada. 5x5s are flying in from Harbor Prepper, Vespillo, Nightcry DePaul. We got Shadow Prepper, Dog Nuts. We got David Aguilar, LPLP, Old Man Bones. All the 5x5s are coming through. It looks like we are good to go. And of course, I'm doing it a little bit earlier to try to help people who might have a hard time being up this late that still want to catch the live. So we're going to try out the new time slot, see how it goes, and see if it's something that works out for everybody moving forward. Now, let's get things going because there's a lot to talk about. I do want to mention Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can do live streams like this one, and I can also make sure to, obviously get all the equipment and everything else I need to be ready for whatever. So a big thanks to Midway USA. And then all the live streams here are also supported by magicprepperbeef.com. And if you're interested in getting shelf-stable, long-term survival beef that's high quality, it's sous vide, it's ribeye, filet mignon, New York strip, whatever it is you want, use code MAGICPREPPER. You get 15% off. This stuff is not inexpensive. It is actually expensive, which is why you need the discount code, but it will help support the channel, and it will also help you have high-quality beef for whatever situation years from now. So that's magicprepperbeef.com. Let's get things rolling, okay? I'm trying to get things set up in a way that'll allow me to be more efficient. Let's try to be more efficient here, okay? Happy to finally make it to a live for the first time instead of the replay, says David Aguilar. That was what I was trying to accomplish. So I can appreciate that we actually made that happen for you. All right, so let's get going. We are going to talk about how ISIS is not done with us and how there's a lot of growing concerns about the idea that we might be facing a 9/11 style attack here in the near future. And in case anybody's wondering, the 9/! is because sometimes things on this platform don't like people to explore certain topics. That's one of them, unfortunately, which isn't sensible in my opinion, but it is something that could cause issues. So that's why I took that route, not because I'm trying to avoid using the actual verbiage or whatever it might be, but I just have to try my best to get around some of the obstacles that's placed ahead of me, which also by hitting the like button, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and sharing these videos can also help do that. So whatever you want to do to try to put the YouTube algo in its place, I would appreciate it. This is from CNN. Not a big fan of CNN per se, but I will say they did put out a story that made sense looking into, and there's a lot more stuff we're going to cover here as well. If you're on the replay crew, make sure you check in. This information is all from within this last week, except for a couple of stories, which are going to be from right before that in order to kind of build context and show you that there are some real concerns here on U.S. soil. ISIS isn't done with us. Arrested Tajiks highlight U.S. fears of terror attack on U.S., okay? Now, we had those 8 Tajiks arrested throughout the country in Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and New York City. And of course, that raised a lot of alarm bells, and that set off additional triggers when it came to the concerns about a possible terror attack here on U.S. soil. And as preppers, people who want to be ready for these types of scenarios, a terrorist attack of some sort here on the U.S. Mainland is one of the most likely events that we could experience here in the near future, at least in my opinion, based on how lax our security bit has been in our borders and how we have evidence of these plots and these cells existing in the country already. The recent arrest of 8 Tajik nationals believed to have connections to ISIS has heightened concerns among national security officials that a dangerous affiliate of the now splintered terror group could potentially carry out an attack on U.S. soil, according to multiple U.S. officials who spoke to CNN. Members of the group initially entered the U.S. at the southern border and requested asylum under U.S. immigration law. It's unclear whether they entered at the same time and place. By the time intelligence collected on overseas ISIS targets connected the men to the terror group, they had already been vetted by immigration authorities and allowed into the country. Though there is no hard evidence indicating they were sent to the U.S. as part of a terror plot, at least some of the Tajik nationals had expressed extremist rhetoric in their communications, either on social media or in direct private communications that U.S. intelligence was able to monitor. That discovery set off a flurry of emergency investigative efforts by federal agents and analysts across the country, sources said, including physical and electronic surveillance of the men. A counterterrorism operation reminiscent of the years immediately following 9/11, when the FBI investigated numerous homegrown plots. After a period of surveillance, federal officials in recent days faced a difficult decision: whether to continue surveilling the men in order to determine if they were part of any potential plot or wider terrorist network, or to move in and take them off the street. Rather than risk the worst-case scenario of a potential attack, senior U.S. officials decided to move in and have the men apprehended by ICE agents, one source told CNN. Now, just to give you some context, we talked about some of this recently, but here's the thing. The FBI wanted to continue surveillance, or at least that's the reporting that we were given at the time of this story, and other U.S. officials decided they didn't want to wait to see something happen. So be aware of that, and we talked about that in a video that I put on the channel last week, that the federal government doesn't have an issue risking your life in order to collect additional intelligence based on some of these threats. So don't assume they're there to protect you. Sometimes they're there to observe and report, and you might get caught in the crossfire in the process. The men remain in federal custody on immigration charges and will eventually be deported following the counterterror investigation into them. Now, deporting them isn't the same as containing them. And the reason I'm saying that is because there's nothing stopping them from coming back. They came in through the southern border illegally in the first place. There's no ifs, ands, or buts whether or not they'll be able to make their way back in. Now, they might be harder to get through in the sense of filtration because of being vetted and having these different documentation show up on their record, but regardless, they're still going to be able to come back in if they want to. So be aware of that too. Deporting them isn't necessarily much better than detaining them. Now, this is why ISIS is being brought up, and this is why this is part of the conversation at this point in time, okay? Of particular concern to U.S. officials was the men hail from Tajikistan, a corner of Central Asia that in recent years has been a source of steady recruitment by ISIS-K, the Afghanistan-based affiliate of the Islamic terrorist group. ISIS-K is led primarily by Tajiks, who have carried out a series of recent attacks in Europe on behalf of the group, including the Crocus Hall attack in Moscow in March that killed more than 100 people. National security officials fear that at least some of the 8 Tajiks were ripe for radicalization by ISIS-K while they were inside of the United States, potentially struggling with isolation, financial stress, or discrimination, all things that can make a person susceptible to ISIS propaganda glorifying violence. Senior officials now see a so-called lone wolf attacker who emerges seemingly from nowhere as perhaps the more likely and potentially equally dangerous threat, rather than the more traditional coordinated plot carried out by trained operatives. Compared to terror networks whose communications can provide possible avenues for surveillance exploitation, lone individuals who do not telegraph their attack plans to anyone present an additionally difficult challenge for security officials. Now, keep this in mind, okay? If we're talking about the potential of a lone wolf attack, and this is what they're saying is the most likely type of attack, or more likely type of attack, this is something that you can actually personally prepare for above and beyond something like an actual 9/11 style attack, which required coordination and additional assets and resources in order to train and deploy these individuals with years of training and everything else regarding how they were able to pull off the style of attack that they were part of. And of course, this whole situation involving a lone wolf, obviously they're pointing more towards the concept of a mass shooting event or something along those lines, right? Something that has a little bit more of a controllable aspect for the average person. Something that the average person is more likely to encounter on a basis of having some sort of reactionary procedure to, right? Like if I am in the World Trade Center on 9/11, there's not much as an individual I can do other than trying my best to evacuate. But if I am on the ground in a shopping center when one of these lone wolf operatives decides to pop off, well, I at least have additional versatility at that point in time, whether it comes to defending myself, whether it comes to having some level of defense on me, whether or not that's a firearm, whether or not that's body armor, whether or not that's just something additional in order to give me space or time. And it also gives you the versatility of leaving the area, hiding, running away, whatever it is. There's a lot of different things that you can do as an individual compared to something more catastrophic on a mass level that you don't have any way of avoiding or reacting to. So just be aware of that. If this is becoming the biggest concern for them, it should tell you what you should be thinking about when it comes to living throughout your daily life. You don't have to change your life, but you should have plans and preparations in order to react to that type of a situation if it were to occur. And when fortunately we have lots of examples of these style of attacks occurring here in the United States, that gives you something to work with when it comes to what it is you might need or might want to have with you in case something like that were to happen when you were nearby. Savage Lee, good to see you. Loretta Hutch, good to see you as well. Dustin Pribble, glad you're here also, okay? Let's see here. Hindsight is 2020, says Planters Freedom Seeds. So one thing I want to say about that, when it comes to the hindsight is 2020 concept, is that what we're going to talk about later in tonight's stream is the fact that all the warning bells that we're getting right now regarding the potential of an attack here on U.S. soil were all going off prior to 9/11 as well. We had all the similar warnings coming from the FBI, coming from the CIA, coming from people in higher up official capacities, letting people know that there was a good chance of some sort of an attack on our soil, but they just could not pinpoint exactly what it would be. And of course, thereafter, we know that certain things happened, and here we are now. So with all these alarm bells going off, we shouldn't write it off as just being hyperbolic, right? We should also, and this is just my opinion, we should also consider the fact, this is where I'm going to get weird on you, right? We should also consider the fact that it's possible some of these things might not be 100% legitimate or in the sense of what we're told they are. Right? What we're told these things are might not actually be what is happening or what has happened. Regardless, the outcome may still affect you, right? So you have to prepare for these things regardless of who's pulling the strings or regardless of who actually was behind the planning of said attack or behind the attack itself, right? We know that there's a lot of strange, mysterious forces out there that make things happen without putting their brand on it, let's just say, right? We are aware of that in this community, especially because we're very skeptical. But regardless of that, it doesn't really matter to the people who are on the ground when something like this happens. So just because there's a possibility of something being more malicious or more obscure than what the official narrative is, doesn't change the action and the kinetic scenario that unfolds thereafter, right? For example, the Crocus Music Hall attack in Moscow, if you were one of the concert goers there, whoever was behind it didn't matter at the time, and whatever entities might have been involved in creating that attack didn't matter to you. All that mattered to you in that moment was surviving and getting out of there alive. And so you have to separate yourself from assuming the worst when it comes to why these things exist or why they might be created, and understand that regardless of any of that, if it happens and you're there, your life is at risk and you need to do what you can to survive, right? So I think I wanted to address that just so we can move forward without too much dark discussion, let's just say. And then we can obviously entertain those ideas as we move along, but we should be aware of the fact that it doesn't change what it is that we're concerned about happening, right? So at least that's how I'm looking at it, okay? Tactus Squirrel says, nothing to see her. Perfect. All right. Yardbirds is here. Always good. Yeah, inside job? Of course not. What? No. We don't do those things around here. So I also want to mention that we had a story come out today about similar things that I, wasn't necessarily aware of until while I was getting ready to go live. And of course, it's exactly to do with what we're talking about tonight. So let's do that. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and move some things around real quick, as I'm always trying to explore better ways to provide this information to everybody. Okay, so here we are. Ex-CIA Deputy Director sounds the alarm about terror threat posed by open border. Surprise, we all know that's a problem, but this story came out today at 3 o'clock Eastern time, and I thought it was interesting because with what I just said about the idea of it not really mattering who's the perpetrator or who's the master planner of some of these scenarios that could unfold here, one thing that does matter is the amount of press that this concept is getting, and the amount that this idea is being put out into the ether should at least make you question whether or not there's a reason everything's set up for it, right? Like everything's being set up for us to be aware that this was going to happen before it happens, right? So sometimes it's on purpose, And sometimes, I guess in my opinion, it's like it almost manifests the situation to occur because of how much talk there is going on about it. So this just is a reminder that this came out today after I had already scheduled this live stream and after I'd already gotten all the news and everything I wanted to cover tonight figured out. Then this came out. And I'm like, well, here we go. I'm going to throw this on tonight as well. But it's interesting to me to see these things develop and to kind of like keep the echo chamber of this possible threat alive, which should tell us that maybe something really is getting close to occurring, right? So, former CI Deputy Director Mike Morrell warned in a recent op-ed of the terror threat posed by vulnerabilities at the U.S.-Mexico border. So, we're not only being told that these threats are real and can easily happen here, but they keep mentioning that southern border scenario as well. So, the southern border is clearly a contentious concept, but we also know it's a huge national security risk, and we're being told about it almost on a daily basis now. Given the particular vulnerability of the southern border, Biden's recent executive order to restrict asylum processing is a valuable step toward limiting entry to the United States. Morrell and Graham Allison, former United States Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy and Plans, wrote in an op-ed published by Foreign Affairs on June 10th. But with U.S. Customs and Border Protection reporting close to 200,000 encounters with migrants at this border each month so far in 2024, and with thousands of people each week crossing the border undetected, the government will need to take additional action, including the use of national emergency authorities, to ensure that terrorists are not exploiting this overwhelmed channel to enter the country. We all know that already. But this story is a lot of repetition about many of the things we just discussed, but it's a reminder that this is the news now. This is what we're talking about almost daily. It just reminds us that we should probably plan on something happening, right? And if nothing happens, that's the best case scenario, and oh well. But with how much it's being talked about, it's probably a good idea to assume we're looking at something occurring here, the next 9/11 style attack possibly, maybe something more small in scale when it comes to something like the Boston Marathon scenario, right? Like those things are definitely becoming more and more of a possibility in the sense of how these lone wolf style scenarios unfold and how the FBI seems to be directed at that concept right now. Let's see here. I'm going to jump back in the chat for a minute. Do you think Russia is near Florida as threat not to interfere with Ukraine or maybe Taiwan? America 1989 said that. And USMC Devil Dog actually responded saying Russia's always in the area. It's not really that big of a deal. So I don't think that it's necessarily a threat to not interfere, but I also don't think it's necessarily as easily written off as being routine, only because of the fact that we have the context of what's happening in the world right now, and we have the threats that have come out of Russia since before entering those waters with this nuclear-powered submarine. And we also have the idea that Russia has now actually declared the United States an enemy versus it just being a contentious relationship. So I think that contextually, it gives me more concern than it usually would have, even if it's generally a routine event. I hope that makes sense when it comes to my thought process on that whole scenario. Okay. Now, let's talk about how the FBI just foiled an ISIS terror attack and that it's just another reminder. This is a real thing, or at least we're being told it is, right? And sometimes that's all that matters is what we're being told because that's what we should expect. Okay, this is from the Mirror. FBI foiled ISIS terror attack on Real Madrid stars and fans after chilling threats issued. A joint investigation involving the American government foiled a group linked to ISIS after terror threats were made against Real Madrid players and spectators attending games. This is from today. So these things are new. Like these are new stories and new developments that are happening right now regarding this group planning attacks or possibly perpetrating attacks on foreign soil. So we have America, we have Europe, we have everyone in the West is being targeted at this point in time. And I think it's reasonable for us to be concerned about seeing something happening here on U.S. soil, right? A joint operation involving the United States government's FBI thwarted an ISIS-linked group after they made terror threats against Real Madrid players and fans at matches. The collaborative effort, which also included Spain's informative service of the Civil Guard and utilized Europol intelligence, successfully infiltrated the Elam Foundation propaganda organization. As reported by El Confidencial, 9 individuals were arrested in Girona, Cadiz, Almeria, and Tenerife in connection with the threats, with 2 being placed in pre-trial detention. Journalist Jose Maria Almo took to Twitter to reveal that the investigation had dismantled a terror network that ordered its followers to attack the bus of Real Madrid football players and fans of the team. The network issued a series of posters with menacing messages, one of which depicted the silhouette of a hooded figure with a rifle positioned within view of Madrid's Santiago Bernabeu Stadium, aiming at the team bus. The poster warned, "My dear brother, he waits in a place near the arrival point of the players. Aim at them along with their supporters." Additionally, another poster contained further threats stating, "My dear brother in Al-Andalus, a very valuable objective awaits you. Break into crowds, distract security with improvised explosives and decoy devices, and advance toward your main objective with determination." El Confidencial has reported that a poster bearing the chilling message, "Kill them all," was circulated ahead of the Champions League quarterfinals in April. The threats seem to be aimed at Real Madrid as they prepared to take on Manchester City in Spain's capital. In other quarterfinal matches of Europe's top-tier cup competition, Arsenal squared off against Bayern Munich at London's Emirates Stadium. Another match was held in Madrid with Atletico taking on Borussia Dortmund at the Wanda Metropolitano Arena. Okay, so, and it goes into further about how these threats existed, how this terror cell was dismantled, and how they were able to infiltrate it with the help of the FBI as well as Europol. But here's the thing. This is from today. Like, these things are happening right now. And if they're targeting sports teams, it means that they want these high-profile targets because that will help spread their message and also show that they mean business and that they can touch people who, to the average person, seem more untouchable. And so apply the same style of planning and same logic to anything here in the United States, and you could kind of understand what a likely target might look like. And if they're putting out posters, literally telling their followers to target the buses and their supporters and their fans, I would have to assume that sporting events here in the United States are probably on the menu as well. So keep that in mind. And now also remember, Real Madrid is a very high-profile football team, right? Soccer team if you're in the U.S., right? So with that consideration in mind, think about what teams here in the U.S. might be considered more high profile and whether or not being in that vicinity could be a higher security risk for you and your family, right? So these are just things you should be taking away from these current events that are occurring. Now, athletics are clearly being targeted, and we also have this story talking about ISIS and the Olympics, okay? Like, this is not just one thing that one official came out and was like, there's a terror threat from the southern border, and everyone just starts talking about how there's a terror threat. There's actual plots and actual things occurring right now regarding this group in places all over the world that we should be aware of, and there's things the U.S. is doing about it, which should tell you that there might be a real threat, because we're also sanctioning people, we're taking people out. You'll see here soon, but we're going to go over that. There's been activity on our end to remove some of these threats too. And generally, I would assume those resources are mostly spent because there's a real threat there. Maybe it's a political thing. I don't know. But here we are. On alert, ISIS makes lone wolves threat to Paris 2024 Olympics with chilling mock-up of Eiffel Tower being attacked by drone. French counter-terror cops have already foiled a plot for an Islamic-inspired terror attack planned for during the Olympics. This is from June 9th. Okay, so 8 days ago, almost within this week. But like I said, there's some stories that are a little bit older than a week old in order to frame context and to show you that this is a real situation that's occurring right now. Islamic terror outfit ISIS has threatened chilling attacks on the upcoming Paris Olympics in an appalling poster message. The death cult posted a propaganda image showing one of its terrorists seemingly flying an armed drone to attack the iconic Eiffel Tower. Lone Wolves Olympics have begun with the will of Allah. Here's the drone. It has a gift on it, and here is the drone operator if you can't tell what this is. Terrifying poster was the latest threat made against the Paris Olympics. Okay. Chilling propaganda poster was released by ISIS. French police officers stand guard near the Olympic rings, which are displayed for Paris 2024 games. Rise of terror. Foiled ISIS terror plots across Europe in the last 12 months. As you can see here, they were in Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, the UK, France, Spain, Germany. They're all over Europe doing these things and having their plots actually foiled, which means there were plots in existence. don't assume that they're doing all this in Europe and not doing a single thing here in the United States, especially with, I don't know, Tajiks being arrested here for ISIS affiliations and other things we're going to talk about here in just a minute. The poster pushed by ISIS-linked social media channels was captioned, "Lone Wolves, Olympics have begun with the will of Allah." The chilling threat vaguely indicates there could be attempts to carry out lone wolf-style terror attacks across Paris amid the upcoming games. France is already on high alert amid a slew of vile threats made by Islamic terror outfits. Just a few days ago, French counter-terror cops foiled a plot for an Islamist-inspired attack which was planned for during the Olympic Games. The country's domestic intelligence agency arrested 18-year-old Rokman B., who is suspected of organizing an attack on a football game in Lyon. The Chechen immigrant to France is said to have wanted to disrupt games planned in Saint-Etienne, a city in the east of the country, and die a martyr by killing spectators or police officers. France's Interior Ministry said he had been detained for actively preparing an attack against the Geoffroy Guichard Stadium in Saint-Etienne during the football games that will take place there. An investigating source said his first attack has been foiled. Okay, so I don't think we have to go through that any further. This is happening, right? Here's a little bit of something for you. The teenager was not known to police and had moved to France with his family from Russia only last year. He's believed to have already carried out reconnaissance on stadiums, with police finding videos and pictures on his phone and laptop in support of ISIS. During a search, anti-terror cops found a photo of the Saint Etienne Stadium on a computer as well as videos. Okay, now, just because we're building context here, I'm trying to show you a detailed roadmap as to how this can really happen, okay? Keep this in mind. This person moved from Russia. I don't know if there's any link to that at all. But what I can say is that we're going to talk about Russia a little bit later tonight, because there is something regarding them that you should be considering when we're also talking about these types of scenarios, okay? So, let me jump back in the chat for a second. They're targeting U.S. pickleball players from the villages, says Fatty McButterpants. Sherman Sales. Looks like the French Bren with the bayonet mount that accepts a white flag of surrender. I don't know what we're talking about, but here we are, okay? Raccoon Eyes. They're like 80s cartoon supervillains who tell the public what they plan to do. And that is something that is interesting, and I think that's something you should definitely should keep in mind. That there is a strategy to permeating this propaganda, because guess what? It might create enough fear to stop people from living their lives, right? That's a lot of times the whole purpose of their activities. It's to disrupt. It's not necessarily to have a kinetic interaction. It's to stop people from being confident in moving forward with their life, right? That's like the definition of terrorism in many ways. But we can't just assume that either. So that's why it's kind of a ball is up in the air type of a situation, because they're telling us their plans, which means they might not be their plans, but they could be their plans. So resources are spent, people are concerned, fear is raised, risks are having to be taken, and the more you spend resources and the more you force governments and municipalities to enhance security and to deploy police and everything else and all those resources that are expended in doing so, the less they'll have in the future to do the same, or the less willing they'll be in the future to do the same if nothing happens. So it could be an attritional strategy as well. So just keep those things in mind. Okay, so here's what's happening to ISIS from the United States, which might show you that there is more going on here than we know, based on the fact that actions are being taken. Okay, first off, 4 ISIS-linked men slapped with U.S. sanctions, okay? It's from News Nation, and this story is from 2 days ago, or updated 2 days ago. 4 men from Uzbekistan and Georgia sanctioned. U.S. says one is an ISIS leader, others have ISIS ties. Assets frozen, Americans can't do business with them. That's the summary. The U.S. has frozen the assets of 3 men from Uzbekistan and 1 from the Republic of Georgia over their alleged ties to ICE and a human smuggling network. The move comes 2 days after 8 people with suspected ties to the terrorist organization were arrested in New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. So this just happened after those 8 Tajiks were found to be in association. And this is not getting the same amount of press. But this should tell you something, that the government is still working to isolate some of these collaborators, let's just say. And they're also dealing with people who are likely here in the U.S. currently operating, which is why their assets are being frozen, because outside of the U.S., that might not have as large of an effect. And understand that this doesn't necessarily say they are here, but there is context and clues here that tell us that that might be the case. So real quick, I'm just going to tell you about it. Okay. The Treasury Department identifies the four as Adam Kamisarev, a native of the Republic of Georgia, and three men from Uzbekistan. I'm not going to say all these names. Treasury officials say that Kamisarev is an ISIS leader and is officially designated a specially designated global terrorist, while the other three are members of the ISIS-linked smuggling network. The department did not say how long the group has been operating or how many people it had smuggled. The effect of the sanctions means that any property the men own in the U.S. is frozen. Americans are banned from conducting business with them, and anyone who does engage could face similar sanctions. The Treasury Department says the investigation that led to the sanctions was done in close cooperation with Turkey. Meanwhile, the 8 men from Tajikistan arrested earlier this week are being held on immigration violations. A source tells News Nation that, as most countries don't share criminal information with the United States, authorities don't have access to the other countries' databases unless the host country puts out an international alert. On top of this, there's a trend of migrants leaving their identification documents at the border, making it harder for authorities to identify and vet them. Christopher Wray recently testified before Congress about the increased national security threats posed by open borders. We know that is already the case, but this is just interesting because it's talking about freezing their assets for any property they own in the U.S. So they might be in the U.S. This doesn't tell us that. But what it does say is that there's a reason why these men are being targeted, and there's a problem with ISIS-related entities operating forms of business or commerce or something here in the United States, which require those assets to be frozen in order to disrupt that business. Okay. We also have more targeting of ISIS leaders. Okay, this is from June 15th, so just 3 days ago, or 2 days ago. What day is it? I don't even know. Top ISIS leader in Somalia was target of U.S. airstrike. U.S. officials said it's unclear if the ISIS leader was killed in the strike. A United States military strike in Somalia targeted the top Islamic State leader in late May, but it remains unclear if the leader was killed in the airstrike, according to U.S. officials. Abdul Qadir Mumin has been identified by the U.S. as the head of the Islamic State in Somalia, an African affiliate of the terror group once known as ISIS. A statement from U.S. Africa Command disclosed that on May 31st, it had conducted an airstrike in a remote area of northeastern Somalia, south of the Gulf of Aden, that killed 3 militants affiliated with the Islamic State. The statement did not provide more accurate information about who was specifically being targeted in the airstrike. 3 U.S. officials have confirmed to ABC News that the target of the strike was the top leader of the Islamic State in Somalia, whom the National Counterterrorism Center identified as Mumin. However, the U.S. officials said it remained unclear if Mumin had been killed in the airstrike. This is information we're just being given now. So not only does this show that we are pushing back against entities like ISIS, right? We're pushing back against them. We're actually trying to disrupt their plans and disrupt their ability to move forward in making plans or executing plans. But we're also providing more reasons for why they may attack us, right? And I'm not saying that's what we shouldn't do that in case they do attack us. What I'm trying to say is that we're targeting their leaders with airstrikes and taking them out. We're also in the midst of sanctioning some of their affiliates. There's good reasons to believe that they may retaliate, right? Not to mention we already have this heightened terror risk. So these are all things to keep in mind. Now, I have an atmospheric water generator that I'm testing, which is making noise right now, even though I turned it off. So I guess next live stream, I'll unplug it. I have to assume the compressor is resetting or something like that. But if you can hear it, I apologize. But I am glad to be testing out an atmospheric water generator because, well, I mean, that's just cool, right? Water out of thin air? Yes, please. Let's see here. Magic said ISIS in the stream so many times, half of us are feds now. Jimmy Degrees, you're right. And you know what? We can all be feds together. And that way, the whole community becomes feds, and then no one's a fed because we're all feds. So who cares, right? And then let's see here. Harbor Prepper says, does he identify as a terrorist? Mike Joey, OMG, I love fear-mongering. Well, I hope you enjoy yourself, Mike Joey. Be on that island on your own, I guess. Ogie Khan, I wonder what his pronouns are. Okay, now I see where that's coming from. Neil Francisco, something a Fed would say. So, look, we have a lot of great people here, and all of us are feds. So, sorry to break the news to you, but just in the same vein that someone recently said I actually wear a wig now, we're even further past me dyeing my hair. I now wear a wig. So we have crossed that Rubicon, and we are no longer going back. Now, we also have Garland, who I don't respect, but is the Attorney General, warns that a terror threat has gone up enormously since October 7th. Now, this was put out June 5th, but it's just a reminder that these officials are coming out and constantly beating the drum. There will be an attack. 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 Eventually, you have to assume there's a good reason they're doing this. Whether or not there's anything nefarious happening behind the scenes, like I said before, doesn't matter. Because if you're on the ground when something like this happens, it's going to matter to you that that's what's happening, not who's doing it, okay? Attorney General Merrick Garland admitted he is worried daily about a possible terrorist attack on the U.S., warning that the threat level has gone up enormously since October 7th. Garland revealed his fears Tuesday when asked in the House Judiciary Committee if there was a raised threat from the millions of migrants entering the country under President Biden's disastrous border policies. I am worried about the possibility of a terrorist attack in the country after October 7th. The threat level for us has gone up enormously, he testified. Every morning we worry about this question. We try to track anyone who might be trying to hurt the country. Of course, this is a major priority for the Justice Department. Okay? Just a reminder that that type of rhetoric is just constantly, over and over and over again. So we have to assume it's being put out there for a reason, right? The echo chamber is a tool, and it's one that's being used to deliver this messaging over and over and over again. You can speculate as to why, but for me, as someone who just wants to be prepared for possibilities, it just tells me I should be more concerned and more, I guess, judicious when it comes to how I'll handle myself when we're out and about, right? And what type of gear and equipment I might want to have with me, right? What kind of first aid training I would like to have and be able to implement if that time ever came. What level of strategy you might want to have in the sense of what to do if something occurs, right? There are classes and there are coaches out there that teach people the best steps in case something were to pop off right where you are, right? So these are things to consider and to possibly invest in at this point in time. Now, let's move forward, okay? We also had a shooting near a U.S. embassy in Beirut. So this is also ISIS affiliated. It just reminds you that these things are kind of like just snowballing and they keep happening and happening and happening. They're starting to become more frequent. And at what point does the frequency hit us here on the mainland? Okay. 6 people, including the alleged gunman, have been arrested in connection with a shooting Wednesday morning near the entrance to the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon, that injured a Lebanese guard, authorities said. And just so you're aware, this is from June 5th as well. So the same day that Merrick Garland was, that story about him testifying about possible terror threats were happening, this was happening in Lebanon. Shots from small arms were heard at about 8:34 a.m. local time. The alleged gunman was shot by the Lebanese army and suffered non-life-threatening injuries, local authorities said. The suspect, a Syrian national, was arrested and taken to a hospital for treatment, the Lebanese army said in Arabic on its official social media account. The Lebanese Army Command said it had also arrested 5 more people in connection with the shooting. They include 3 members of the alleged shooter's family, as well as a Syrian citizen and a Lebanese citizen who are suspected of having a relationship with him. The army continues its raid operations in parallel with its follow-up investigations under the supervision of the competent judiciary, the Lebanese Army Command said in a statement. A motivation in the shooting is unknown at this time. The State Department's Diplomatic Security Service was working with Lebanese authorities to determine the motivation. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters during a briefing Wednesday. The alleged shooter was wearing what appeared to be an ISIS insignia, Miller said, but we are conducting a full investigation with the Lebanese authorities into the actual motivations. Following the incident, Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor, said on Good Morning America Wednesday that all American personnel in Lebanon are safe and accounted for. A member of the embassy's Lebanese Guard Force was seriously wounded in the shooting, according to Miller. The embassy was secured immediately following the shooting and remained closed to the public on Wednesday, Miller said. It is expected to reopen on Thursday, U.S. officials said in a security alert. So, I would assume wearing ISIS insignia would mean you're affiliated with that group. And involving yourself in a shooting right outside of the American embassy in Lebanon, of all places, probably not unrelated, right? And speaking of Lebanon, that is all just going to hell really quick. So we'll talk about that towards the end here because it's not as relevant to the conversation tonight, but it is a reminder. And you'll see why it's a reminder here in just a second. Jumping in the chat. I am not a Fed. Does my Facebook say I'm a Fed? Oh, yeah, I dropped most social media years ago. Thanks, MP, says Lefty GR. Well, it is what it is. If you get told you're a Fed enough times, you might just start to believe it, because that's where I'm at. And so I've been writing the government about my non-existent pension check for quite some time now, saying, hey, hello, I still haven't been receiving it, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I am just upset because, to my knowledge, I am one of you, and I should get that check. Assurance Arms. Wait, that's a wig? All this time trying to stress myself out to be the cool pinstripes in my hair. Yeah, I don't know what model of wig it is, and I don't know exactly how I apply it daily while in my sleep, but every day I wake up and it's there, and every day I go to bed it's there, and it's probably the best wig I ever bought. Let's see here. Howdy All-Star ID check-in, says Don Pyle. Good to see you. All right. Listening from the Bay Area, California, RJ Paradise. Hey, I used to work in the Bay Area, and it's tough out there, and I'm sure the money is going even shorter there than it does in other parts of the country. So do what you can and maybe get out of there one day. That's what I had to do, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, okay? Now, let's get going on something that occurred 2 months ago, but it's a good reminder as to the fact that these things might be real and might be happening, okay? Let's talk about what happened what almost happened in Idaho just a couple of months ago. And this is just to build context about the idea of this being a real situation and it being something you might actually be able to personally prepare for rather than it being something more grandiose that just affects us no matter what, right? Idaho teen arrested and accused of planning to kill churchgoers in the name of ISIS. Alexander Scott Mercurio, 18, was arrested in early Saturday, a day before prosecutors said he planned to carry out an attack, okay? This is just a reminder, this is from April 9th, 2024. But these are the types of attacks that they're saying are more and more likely, which is giving us an idea as to what to maybe expect, because this is someone who claimed to be affiliated with ISIS that had an attack planned and only got foiled the day before they were supposed to perpetrate it. An Idaho teenager was arrested and accused of planning to kill churchgoers during services across his hometown in the name of the Islamic State group, authorities have said. Alexander Scott Mercurio? I'm just going to go with Mercurio. 18, from Coeur d'Alene, was arrested early Saturday as part of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force investigation, a day before prosecutors say he planned to carry out his attack. He is accused of attempting to provide material support and resources to ISIS, according to a federal criminal complaint filed in Idaho on Monday. The FBI said he was actively planning to attack churches Sunday in Coeur d'Alene, a town 30 miles east of Spokane, Washington, using weapons including knives, firearms, and fire, a statement said. The attack was timed to coincide with the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, investigators said. According to a direct message sent to an FBI confidential human source, quoted in a lengthy affidavit attached to the criminal complaint, Mercurio set out his plan in detail. Stop close by the church, equip the weapons, and storm the temple. Kill as many people as possible before they inevitably disperse or scatter, then burn the temple to the ground and flee the scene, Mercurio allegedly wrote. He said he would then repeat this for all 21 churches in town, according to prosecutors. Mercurio will face up to 20 years in federal prison if convicted. A court date has not been set. NBC News could not immediately identify an attorney for Mercurio. Now, keep this in mind. First off, him going to prison for 20 years when he's 18 years old, that's not going to do it for me. Why? Because prison actually is the best place to get radicalized. So if you're sending an ISIS guy to prison, he's just going to be more ISIS by the time he gets out. And he's going to have 20 years of maturation and lifting weights on his side when he comes back out and decides that he's even more ISIS than he was before. So I'm not sure exactly how these things should be handled, but what I do know is that that's not going to help the situation. It just means 20 years from now, we're going to have to deal with this guy in probably a worse capacity. But, again, I'm not a fan of the police state either, and I'm not a fan of imprisonment without a crime, so it's a really difficult situation for me. And I think that the way things were done a long time ago sometimes are the way things are supposed to be done. What? Anyway, law enforcement officers found an ISIS flag, butane canisters, lighters, handcuffs, a knife, a pipe, and a machete at his house during his arrest, as well as several firearms belonging to his father, which he allegedly planned to take. Mercurio also spread ISIS propaganda online and discussed ways to support the group financially, as well as traveling to West Africa to help its operations there, the affidavit said. The FBI said it became aware of Mercurio during an investigation into a fundraising network that uses cryptocurrency and other platforms to support ISIS in Syria and its Afghan affiliate ISIS Wilayat Khorasan, also known as ISIS-K. Okay, so that was a real threat that could have happened here, which was foiled. That's the type of threat you should probably be considering because it was one that almost occurred. And if we're being told that ISIS is a huge threat and that a lone wolf attack is the more likely scenario, and the group is using social media to try to radicalize people here in the country rather than training operatives and sending them here, then I would conclude that places like my church are more vulnerable to these types of attack. If this guy's plan was to go basically shoot up every church in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on a Sunday, like 21 churches, this guy really thought he could pull that off. So you should probably consider that possibility. Even if it's so remote it doesn't make sense. You live in, some kind of Arctic tundra of Alaska with one post office and one church. That church could still be a target, right? Unlikely? Sure. Possible? Always. And with things going the way they are, until we see what is targeted and what is attacked, we won't know what the target will be. So just plan accordingly. You don't have to change your life around. You don't have to freak out about it. But maybe just step up some of your preparedness efforts in the sense of personal protection and what you're willing to do in the sense of preparing yourself legally for whatever could happen afterward, right? So these are all things to consider, okay? Honorificable says way too close to home. I agree. Peter Birdsall says white hair is a crown of glory. Own it. I'll take it. I'm good with that. He had a paperclip and a stack of gum. Who is this, MacGyver? Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, like some of it was a little off, right? Yeah, he had a pipe. Okay, well, was he making a pipe bomb or did he literally just have a pipe? Because those things don't really matter a whole lot if it was just a pipe that he had laying on the ground. But at the same time, the firearms he's going to steal from his dad, all the other stuff, I don't know. All I know is it sounds like this person was willing to do it. Even if they didn't have the proper equipment to pull it off, they were willing. And sometimes willingness is all you actually need to do something terrible, right? So, Susie Q says, geez, and I agree with you, Susie Q. Coeur d'Alene says, Sandra Hodges, I just like to throw flair on words because I see them and I feel like there's probably got to be some French in there somewhere, and I just roll with it. But you know what? You're right. Coeur d'Alene is how it's supposed to be said. I just want it to be fancy, So let's see here. Now, part of what got me started on this kick tonight was an article from SOFREP, which I thought was interesting enough to share with everybody. And I will go ahead and pop that in right now. And that's going to be about how we should brace ourselves for another 9/11 style attack. Okay? And with all the warnings happening right now and everything else going on in the world, it was reasonable for me to read through this article and then use it as a starting point to explore further parts of the conversation that needed to be had, right? So, this is a reminder of what happened pre-9/11 and what we're kind of experiencing right now based on all the talk happening from these different official capacities should remind you that there's a good chance something like this might happen. George Tenet took the helm as CIA director in May 1997 and remained in the position through the harrowing events of September 11th. Throughout his leadership, he consistently voiced concerns about Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Before the devastating attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, Tenet repeatedly testified, warning about the group's threat to U.S. interests both at home and abroad. In a February 1999 statement, he unequivocally stated, "There is no doubt whatsoever that Osama bin Laden is planning more attacks against us." Tenet postulated that al-Qaeda's follow-up attacks could be what he called simultaneous and spectacular. In private, the man was even more emphatic in his beliefs. He broke protocol by writing personal letters to President Bill Clinton about the severity of what we faced as a nation. He also voiced his apprehensions with President George W. Bush and National Security Advisor Rice several times in 2001. Although the CIA and the FBI could not pinpoint the specifics of the 9/11 plot, Tenet's warnings unfortunately became a nightmarish reality. Fast forward 25 years, and FBI Director Christopher Wray is again raising red flags. While his discussions within the Biden administration remain behind closed doors, his public testimonies couldn't be clearer. During a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing in December, Wray stated, "When I sat here last year, I explained how we were already in a heightened threat environment. Following Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, we've seen the threat from foreign terrorists rise to a whole other level," he added. Wray has consistently emphasized the security gaps at the southern border of the United States, where thousands slip through undetected every week. This is a building danger impacting the citizens of our great nation on all levels, and unless controlled, disaster is all but inevitable. FBI Director Christopher Wray isn't the only high-ranking official raising red flags. Since taking command of U.S. Central Command in 2022, General Eric Kurilla has been vocal about the dangerous capabilities of terrorist groups in the Middle East and South Asia. He points to al-Qaeda, ISIS, and specifically ISIS-K, the ISIS affiliate in Afghanistan and Pakistan, as serious threats. Meanwhile, Christine Abizaid, the outgoing director of the National Counterterrorism Center, recently highlighted an elevated global threat environment at a conference in Doha, adding weight to these urgent warnings. Last week, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland told the House Judiciary Committee that the threat level has gone up enormously, which we already went over. While a full understanding of the threat landscape requires access to classified intel, the statements from FBI Director Wray and CENTCOM Commander Kurilla likely mirror the classified information they're privy to in their agency's operations. Their warnings should be taken seriously. Sure, not every terrorism warning since 9/11 has panned out, but that doesn't mean we can afford to ignore the alarms being sounded today. Historically, the intensity of terrorism warnings is often aligned with the actual risk. Plus, these alerts have sometimes spurred government actions that thwarted terrorist plots. Given the high stakes, it's wiser to err on the side of caution. The intentions and proven abilities of various terrorist groups, combined with the fact that numerous significant plots have been thwarted, lead to an undeniable conclusion. The United States is at a high risk of a terrorist attack in the near future. Okay, which I agree with, because it does have all of the same building blocks as what we experienced through 9/11. There was the heightened risk and all of the warnings coming from these official authorities before the attack occurred. Now, and keep in mind, regardless of all of your thought processes and your concepts regarding 9/11 as a whole, the people who were involved in it didn't care about that when it was happening, right? So keep that in mind. That's like something I just want to make sure to drill home, because that none of that stuff matters if you're the one who's going down, right? So, why else is this such a threat right now? Why are we talking about Russia about 20 minutes ago, and I haven't brought it up again since? Well, because there are some things I'm concerned about regarding these heightened terror alerts and the fact that Russia is being pushed to the brink of doing something egregious based on actions of NATO and the U.S. and everything else. I'm not saying anyone's wrong for the actions that we're doing or not wrong or whatever. Being apolitical about it, my concern is, what could this do to us here on U.S. soil? And this is where my concern lies regarding that, okay? And Oki Khan says, Ray, Captain Obvious. Right, exactly. But is it obvious to everyone is the question, because not everybody thinks it's obvious, unfortunately. And then we have, let's see. Oh, you guys are all networking. I like that. Well, that's good. You guys should definitely put something together. We need people. Don't let OPSEC be the reason you don't survive. Wouldn't that be ironic? I didn't tell anybody about my preps, and I didn't try to network or build a community or have anyone on my side because I was worried about OPSEC. And then when everything happened, I didn't survive because there was no one there I could rely on because of OPSEC. So the OPSEC is actually what took me out, even though it was the thing I thought was going to save me. Keep that in mind. That's something that maybe I'll have to make a whole standalone video on. Nick, people that keep talking about your hair is getting really annoying. To be honest, I don't even notice it or care. The hair comments make me not want to watch live streams. Yeah, well, you know, Nick, at least it's something to talk about, right? Because my face would be too easy to pick on. So we have to talk about something else. So, and I appreciate the super chat, Nick. I really do. Now, why am I talking about Russia? Here's why. And this is what concerns me based on all these terror threats and all these terror groups and everything else. Let's not forget that Russia is willing to arm U.S. enemies just like Washington does with Ukraine. And this was told to us, you know, almost a couple weeks ago now. But this is a reminder that this is a thought process and a strategy that Russia is willing to engage in because of the fact that, well, in their mind, we're doing the same thing, right? We're equipping and arming Ukraine, and Ukraine's using those weapons and those resources against Russia, in Russia now, destroying Russian targets and killing Russian citizens. So, in order to equalize the playing field, Russia's saying, well, why don't they do the same thing? What groups do you think they'd be willing to arm or finance that have the most capability of actually hurting us on U.S. soil and doing the most damage without necessarily being easily traced back to Russia? Those are questions you should be asking yourself, okay? Russia can supply weapons to any U.S. enemy, the same way Washington does with Ukraine, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said. Russian President Vladimir Putin said at a meeting with the heads of international news agencies on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum on Wednesday that Moscow is mulling ways to respond to weapons supplies to Kiev for attacks on Russia. According to Putin, supplying similar weapons to regions from where painful strikes could be carried out on Western facilities is one possible option. This marks quite a significant change in our foreign policy, Medvedev noted, commenting on the president's position. This is what the Yankees and their drooling European dogs think. We have the right to send any weapons to Ukraine, the enemy of our country, but no country can help Russia. Now let the U.S. and its allies feel the direct impact of the use of Russian weapons by third parties, he said, commenting on Russian President Vladimir Putin's remark on the issue. This could be anyone who considers Yankee land as their enemy, regardless of their political beliefs or international recognition. If the U.S. is their enemy, then they are our friends, the Russian Security Council deputy chairman noted. And let the use of Russian weapons in the so far unidentified regions be as devastating as possible for their and our adversaries. Let the sensitive facilities of countries providing weapons to Ukraine burn in hellfire, along with those who operate them, Medvedev said. As for us, we will rejoice in the successful strikes involving our weapons against our common enemies, he concluded. So, let me know. Here, we're going to do a fun one. I like doing fun ones sometimes. Water Tiger loves my hair, and I appreciate you, Water Tiger. Let's see here. Let's do a quick poll, because I can do those, and I think they're fun. Let's see. Do you think Russia will arm, let's just call them extremist groups, to hurt the USA? Yes or no? You guys let me know, but it sounds to me like they're more than willing to at least entertain it. I don't know if it'll happen, but I do know they're literally saying that that's something they might do. And Russia, unlike, I don't know, most of the Middle East, has access to weapons that could do a lot of damage. And they also have access to weapons that could, well, seem terroristic in nature and not necessarily look like they were presented by Russia specifically, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, let's think of it. If Russia was to supply, let's say, I don't know, ISIS with a dirty bomb, and they detonated a dirty bomb in one of our major cities, do you think that we would immediately assume it came from Russia? Or would it look like the typical terrorist activity that we've been warned about for years and years and years now? And how far can that go? And what's this dirty bomb look like? Is it biological? Is it chemical? Is it nuclear? There's all types of capabilities there. Not to mention, we have warships docked in Havana, right? So maybe nothing regarding, conventional military action happening there. But what if they're dropping some supplies off? What if they're just leaving some stuff behind? What if there's other people on the island that they might give those supplies to? What if they have proximity to the U.S. because of how close they are to Florida in that time? These are things that you should at least consider. I'm not saying that this is exactly what's going to happen, but I do know that based on what they're saying out in the public, there's no reason to believe they wouldn't arm one of these entities who's willing to do something here in the United States, even though they're also the enemy of these entities, right? So ISIS-K supposedly also attacked Russia, right? Like they don't like Russia either because Russia's on Syria's side. ISIS was part of the Syrian civil war on the other side against Syria, right? Like all that stuff, and it all fell apart, three-letter agencies and the like, right? We all know that. But what I'm trying to say is that with the current environment, I wouldn't put it past Russia to overlook the differences they have with some of these groups and say, well, look, if you're the guys who are willing to do it, and we don't have to take any blame because you're willing to accept it all and you're not going to let anything lead back to us, I guess we could work something out, right? Like it seems like a reasonable path for them to take if this is their goal, which is why the concern should be there, not only because these groups are here in the country and already have their influence and their operatives ready to go, but because we have a nuclear superpower foreign adversary publicly stating that they'd be willing to arm our enemies, and our enemies can use Russian weaponry against us here or at other sensitive facilities because that's what we're doing to them, right? I mean, it seems reasonable for me to assume that can happen. Are PMC battle packs, ammo, and them sealed packs any good for long-term storage, or should I keep stocking Federal HST 9mm, says Nick with the $20 super chat, which I greatly appreciate. And what I will say, Nick, is that, the sealed packs are good to go for long-term storage. I don't usually find them to be the most financially beneficial in the sense of they're usually more expensive than buying a case or something like that, right? And then storing a case separately in something like a Milsurp ammo can, which is generally found cheaper than the cost of the case plus the cost of the ammo can, right? Or the cost of the case and the ammo can is cheaper than the equivalent of the battle pack when it comes to the amount of rounds. So I'd say there's no problem buying those and just leave them sealed up and who cares? Generally, you're going to be fine. But if you want to get the best bang for your buck, buying the ammo by the case is going to be less expensive than buying the battle packs. That's what I found anyway. So, and the PMC battle packs are just cool, right? So if you just want them to be cool, then why not? John Sith says, oh, we got a Sith in the house. Be wary. So Magic Prepper, you're touching on the philosophy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what Russia's saying. So if Russia's saying that, then we have to assume that that's how they're moving forward, right? MR says Chuck Burger. You know, I do like my meat rare, but I don't necessarily put cold cheese on it. So there's something to consider there, okay? Oh my gosh, yeah, that was out of control. Bobby Net, Russia has tons of missiles. Sure they do. Sure they do. So yeah, and Stephen Petrikowski said HSTs are still good to go though, and I like HSTs, but here's the thing. I have enough stocked up on specialty rounds to make me feel good about it, but that's not what I keep tons and tons and tons of rounds of because I shoot a lot. So I stock up mostly on like range ammo because of affordability, and then I have enough of the expensive stuff that if I were to go through all of it during an emergency, then like something really, really wrong is happening because there's no excuse for me to still be alive after that. Does that make sense? So, one more thing to keep in mind and to consider regarding some of these situations is the fact that we have, and I do see our poll here, 81% think that Russia would arm extremist groups to hurt us. So, and 19 say no, which is fair as well. But this is just something to remind us that, you know, I think a large portion of the community here just assumes that that's a possibility, okay? Let's see here. I want to share one more thing. Just to keep everybody on the same page with this whole like World War III stuff that's going on and the fact that these extremist groups are likely to carry out attacks here on U.S. soil. Russia talking about proxies getting armed by the U.S. and being used against them and everything. Keep this in mind. Proxies are the name of the game these days. And we have Israel and Hezbollah on the brink of all-out war, officials warn. This is an article from Fox News that came out today. Hezbollah is a crown jewel of Iran's terror empire, Israel says. Israeli officials warn that the country is on the brink of a full-scale war with Hezbollah if the terrorist groups continue to increase its aggression in northern Israel. The IDF made the warning on Sunday, just a day before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was set to meet with Amos Hochstein, a top aide to President Biden. Biden's administration is pushing Israel to avoid a war in Lebanon, but IDF officials continue to highlight the outsized threat posed by Hezbollah compared to Hamas. Hezbollah's increasing aggression is bringing us to the brink of what could be a wider escalation, an IDF spokesman warned Sunday. So if that situation spirals out of control and creates a larger war front in the Middle East, that drags us further into it most likely, and it opens up more opportunities for attacks here in the U.S. because Hezbollah, like Hamas, like everyone else, operates in a way that isn't conventional, right? And so we also know Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. So we have proxy wars all over the place that are all linked to larger entities. And these larger entities are becoming a real problem, especially when it comes to Russia and when it comes to China and when it comes to the fact that the easiest way to hurt us on our soil right now is through a terror attack of some kind, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about how tonight I have the private live stream, and it starts at 9:10, actually. I think I said 9:15. We'll hang out for a few minutes to get everybody in. If you want to be part of the private live stream, it starts pretty much right after this. You can hit the join button down below to be a YouTube channel member, or you can join me on Subscribestar if you want to support the channel directly while also getting some other benefits as well. And those things are all, well, just something I'm trying to put together to create, let's just say, a secondary landing pad in case things fall apart here, if you know what I'm trying to say. But let me jump on over here real quick. And I want to share this link with you all. Okay. If you want to go to Subscribestar, I just put the link in the live chat. It's also in the description. MagicPrepperBeef.com is also there as well. Don't forget the code MagicPrepper to get 15% off It is high quality steak. You could have steak in the apocalypse and literally trade it for like anything you could think of because everyone's going to want beef, right? So keep that in mind. Now, The Watchmen. Magic Prepper would make a good scared victim from a poltergeist movie. I'll take it. Gen X Gemini, is this your new schedule? I missed the first 20 minutes tonight. I'm trying it out. I'm not necessarily permanently going to be starting at 8 o'clock, but I wanted to try a slightly earlier session to see if it might help some people who usually can't make it live because of, having work the next day or being at work currently or whatever it is. So I'm just testing it out. So if it goes well and people appreciate it starting slightly earlier, then maybe we'll keep doing that moving forward. But I'm just trying some stuff out because if y'all don't know, we're definitely fighting some obstacles here on the platform, right? And things have changed in regards to how the algo seems to want to do things. So if you guys can help me out by sharing, liking the videos, getting the notification bell, and doing all the stuff, subscribing, then hopefully these things can get permeated into the prepper sphere a little bit more, and we can get the messaging a little bit further out, right? But first time viewer here, EDP, Everyday Pyro, says, because of exactly what I said. So, well, I appreciate that. And I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that, we're getting some more people into these chats because it's just good for us all to be on the same page, okay? So, Gen X Gemini, I'm glad you are experiencing highlights on your Monday nights thanks to this show, and hopefully the time change doesn't hurt you too bad. The video guys, you won't survive the apocalypse. That's like the video or you won't survive the apocalypse. Got it, Steven. Perfect. All right. Listen, like I said, private live stream starts soon. Hit the join button. Go to Subscribestar. Anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. There's a lot of good stuff there, especially when it comes to discounts and affiliate links and everything else where you can find yourself some good deals on preparedness-related items. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.